I agreed to be a plus one at a wedding for one very simple reason. I was lonely, a little bored, and the open bar was free. That's it. That's the whole logic. I didn't ask who the groom was. I didn't ask how my date knew him. I definitely didn't ask for pictures. If I had, I probably wouldn't have gone. It started with a text from my friend Jenna at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Weird question, but are you free next Saturday? That alone should have been a red flag. Nothing good ever comes after weird question that late at night. But I just finished another soul-crushing day at work, microwaving leftovers for the third night in a row, scrolling through Instagram watching everyone else live their lives. So I replied, "Depends." "Why?" She called immediately. "I need a plus one," she said, no greeting, no build-up. "For a wedding." I laughed. "You hate weddings." "I know. That's why I don't want to go alone." I pictured it instantly. Me in a rented suit, bad chicken, forced small talk, pretending to care about centerpieces. I almost said no. But then she added, "There's an open bar. Like, a real one. That's how they get you." "Okay," I said. "Whose wedding?" There was a pause. Just a beat too long. "Someone I know from college," she said quickly. "You don't know him." I didn't love how fast that answer came, but I didn't push. Jenna had always been like that, chaotic, impulsive, allergic to details. Besides, it wasn't like this was a blind date. I was just arm candy. Decorative gay friend. Easy. "Fine," I said. "I'll go. But if I get seated at a table with children or grandparents, I'm leaving." She laughed. "Deal." That should have been the end of it. The rest of the week passed in a blur. I borrowed a suit from my roommate, got a haircut I didn't really like, and let myself believe this would be nothing more than a mildly awkward Saturday with free alcohol and an excuse to dress up. I didn't think about the groom again. Not once. Saturday came faster than I expected. The venue was about an hour out of the city, one of those renovated barns that still smelled faintly like money and manure. Strings of lights hung everywhere. There was gravel under my shoes and soft acoustic music floating through the air. Very Pinterest. Very not my usual scene. Jenna met me in the parking lot, already half stressed, half excited, fixing her dress in the reflection of her car window. "You clean up nice," she said, giving me a quick hug. "Thanks. I feel like I'm cosplaying as someone who has their life together." She smiled, but something about it felt off, tighter than usual. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, totally. Let's grab drinks." We walked in together, and the place was already buzzing. Laughter, clinking glasses, people hugging like they hadn't seen each other in years. I let myself relax a little. This was fine. This was normal. Then I saw the seating chart. Or more specifically, I saw his name, printed in elegant script at the top of a large whiteboard. Mason Reynolds and partner. My stomach dropped. Not because the name was unfamiliar, but because it wasn't. Mason Reynolds was my ex. Not just an ex. The ex. The one who didn't just break my heart, but carefully dismantled it, piece by piece, then moved across the country and out of my life without looking back. The last person on earth I expected to see standing at the end of an aisle in a tailored suit. I turned slowly to Jenna. "You said I didn't know him," I said, my voice flat. She didn't meet my eyes. "I said you didn't know him anymore." That's when the music shifted. Applause broke out. And at the far end of the barn, I saw him. Mason. Taller than I remembered. Broader. Calm in a way he never used to be. Smiling as he stepped forward, greeting guests, completely unaware that the plus one walking in behind his bride's college friend was the man he once loved and left. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I hadn't seen Mason in 4 years, and somehow I had just agreed to be his wedding date. My first instinct was to leave. Not dramatically. No confrontation. Just a quiet Irish goodbye back to the car. Maybe a polite lie to Jenna later about food poisoning or a sudden family emergency. Anything but standing there while Mason Reynolds got married 10 feet away from me. But my body didn't move. I stayed frozen, staring at him like my brain needed extra time to process the fact that he was real. Not a memory. Not a nightmare I'd wake up from at 3 a.m. He was right there, laughing with some guy in a navy suit, his hand resting easily on the other man's shoulder. That part hit harder than I expected. Mason always hated public affection when we were together. Said it made him feel on display. But now, he looked relaxed, grounded, like this version of him had figured something out I never could. Jenna leaned in close. Trevor, I'm so sorry. I finally looked at her. You knew. She winced. I didn't know you'd come if I told you. So you lied. I strategically omitted. I let out a sharp laugh that didn't sound like it belonged to me. You brought me as a +1 to my ex's wedding. When you say it like that, it sounds bad. It is bad. She grabbed my arm. Look, Mason doesn't know you're here. We can just stay for the ceremony, grab drinks, leave early. The word ceremony made my chest tighten. I followed her down the aisle anyway, my legs moving on autopilot. Every step felt surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. We slid into a row near the back. Close enough to see. Too close. Mason stood at the front, hands clasped, eyes bright. The groom. I still couldn't wrap my head around that. When he turned slightly, I caught his profile and that familiar twist in my stomach came back instantly. Same jawline. Same small scar near his eyebrow from when we were 22 and drunk and stupid and thought we were invincible. God, I hated that I noticed. The music softened. People stood. The officiant began speaking. Words about love, commitment, choosing each other every day. I tried not to listen. I failed. Because every sentence felt like it was aimed directly at the version of me that Mason left behind. The Trevor who waited. Who believed him when he said, I just need time. Who watched him pack a suitcase and promise, this isn't goodbye. It had been goodbye. When Mason's partner walked down the aisle, everyone smiled. I did too, automatically, even though my throat felt tight. He was handsome, kind-looking, the kind of guy who probably never doubted whether Mason would stay. Lucky him. Then it happened. Mason glanced out at the crowd. Not intentionally, just a casual sweep of the room. And his eyes landed on me. I felt it before I saw it, the shift. The way his smile faltered for half a second. The way his posture stiffened, just barely. Our eyes locked. There was no mistaking it. Recognition flashed across his face, followed immediately by shock. Then confusion. Then something else, something quieter, harder to read. He didn't look angry. He looked undone. My pulse spiked. I should have looked away. I didn't. For a long moment, the rest of the room disappeared. No music. No officiant. Just me and Mason, staring at each other like the past had reached out and grabbed us both by the throat. Then his partner squeezed his hand. Mason blinked, refocused, turned back to the altar. The ceremony continued, but everything had changed. Jenna leaned toward me, whispering, he saw you. No kidding, I murmured. You okay? I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. By the time the ceremony ended and applause filled the barn, my hands were shaking. I clapped along with everyone else, smiling like a well-trained guest, while my mind raced. I shouldn't be here. He shouldn't have seen me. And there was no universe where this ended without something breaking open. As people stood and moved toward cocktail hour, I stayed seated, staring at the floor. Trevor, Jenna said gently, we can leave now. I stood up slowly. That's when I heard my name. Not from her. From behind me. Trevor. My heart stopped. I turned around. Mason was standing there, close enough that I could see the flecks of green in his eyes. Close enough to smell his cologne, the same one he used to wear, the one I'd never been able to forget. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he swallowed and said quietly, I didn't know you'd be here. Yeah, I said. Surprise. For a moment, it felt like the world had narrowed down to the space between us. Mason looked different up close. Not in the obvious ways. He was still tall, still handsome in that annoyingly effortless way, but there was a steadiness to him I didn't remember. Like he'd finally learned how to stand without apologizing for taking up space. I hated that too. I didn't know, he repeated, softer this time. Like maybe if he said it again it would fix something. I figured, I said. I'm not exactly on the invite list. His mouth twitched, almost a smile, then disappeared. Can we talk? The question landed heavier than it should have. Now? I glanced around pointedly. Kind of your big day. He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, now, just 2 minutes. I looked past him and saw his partner across the room, laughing with a group of guests, completely unaware that the past had just walked in wearing a borrowed suit. Guilt pricked at me, sharp and unwanted. I shouldn't, I said. I know, Mason replied immediately. But I'd really like to. That was always his thing. Calm, reasonable, like he wasn't asking me to rip open something I'd spent years stitching closed. I exhaled. 2 minutes. He led me outside, around the side of the barn where the noise dulled and the late afternoon air felt cooler. The sun was starting to dip, casting everything in that soft, golden light that makes even bad decisions look romantic. You look happy. I almost told him the truth, that I wasn't, that I'd spent the last 4 years measuring every relationship against what we'd had and coming up short. Instead, I shrugged. You're getting married, I said. You win. His brow furrowed. This isn't about winning. Sure it is, I snapped, then immediately softened. Sorry, this is a lot. I know, he said quietly. Seeing you here wasn't expected. Funny. That's exactly how I'd describe you standing at the altar. He smiled at that, but there was tension underneath it. Something unresolved. Sat between us, thick and familiar. I never meant to hurt you, he said. There it was. The sentence I'd replayed in my head 100 different ways, always imagining it would feel better to hear it out loud. Didn't. I know, I said. That almost makes it worse. He nodded slowly. I wasn't ready back then. I was scared. Of you. Of us. Of how much it mattered. And now, I asked before I could stop myself. Now he hesitated. Now I am, he said. Just too late. That one hurt, sharp and clean. We stood there in silence, the muffled sound of laughter drifting from inside. Somewhere behind us, glasses clinked. Life moved on as it always did. I should go back in, he said eventually. Yeah, I agreed. You should. He took a step back, then stopped. I'm glad you came. I met his eyes. I'm not. He winced like he deserved it. Maybe he did. Mason turned and walked back inside, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the quiet hum of regret. When I went back in, cocktail hour was in full swing. Jenna handed me a drink without asking. I downed it too fast. That was fast, she said carefully. Fast enough, I replied. I thought that would be the end of it. An uncomfortable run-in. A chapter 1 didn't need to reread. I was wrong, because as the night went on, I kept catching Mason looking at me, across the room, over shoulders, when he thought I wasn't paying attention, and every time our eyes met, something unspoken passed between us. Not longing, not exactly, unfinished business. By the time dinner was announced and we were guided to our tables, my nerves were shot. And then I saw the place card. Trevor, table 6. I looked up. Mason's table. Directly across from the groom. I stared at it, stunned. Jenna leaned over my shoulder. Oh, I echoed. That's all you've got? I swear I didn't do that, she said quickly. Seating wasn't my job. I swallowed hard, my heart already racing. Across the room, Mason noticed too. He froze. Then, slowly, he met my gaze. And for the first time that day, he looked genuinely nervous. I stood there staring at the place card like it might rearrange itself out of pity. Didn't. Okay, I muttered. Okay, this is fine. Jenna raised an eyebrow. You're doing that thing where you lie to yourself. I am absolutely not dash. I stopped, exhaled. Fine, I am. But I'm also not causing a scene at a wedding I was tricked into attending. You weren't tricked, she said weakly. Jenna. Okay. You were a little tricked. I picked up my place card and my drink and walked toward table 6 before I could lose my nerve. Every step felt heavier than the last. I was acutely aware of everything, the scrape of chairs, the low hum of conversation, the way people glanced up and smiled politely as I passed. Mason was already seated when I got there. So was his partner. Great. The groom Evan, according to the place card, looked up at me with an easy smile. Hey, you must be Trevor. That's me? I said, forcing my own smile into place. Congrats. Thanks. Sit, please. He gestured to the empty chair directly across from Mason. You know Mason, right? The table went quiet. Mason cleared his throat. Yeah, we do. Evan blinked. Oh. I sat down before Mason could say something worse. We used to know each other. A long time ago. Oh. Evan said, grinning, clearly assuming this meant something casual and harmless. Small world. If only. Dinner was torture in the most polite way possible. Evan was charming, genuinely. He talked about how they met, how Mason proposed, how long they'd been planning the wedding. I nodded, smiled, laughed at the right moments, all while trying not to choke on the fact that Mason had proposed to someone else. Mason barely touched his food. Every so often, I'd feel his eyes on me. Not lingering, not obvious but aware. Like he was constantly checking whether I was still there, whether this was still real. At one point, Evan leaned toward me and said, "So how do you know Jenna?" "She's been ruining my life for about 6 years," I said dryly. Jenna, seated a few chairs down, shot me a warning look. Evan laughed. "That tracks." Mason finally spoke. "Trevor and I lived together for a while." Evan turned to him, surprised. "You never mentioned that." Mason's jaw tightened. "It didn't come up." I took a sip of wine, letting that hang in the air. After dinner, people started migrating toward the dance floor. The lights dimmed. Music swelled. The mood shifted into something warmer, looser. I considered slipping out quietly. I didn't get the chance. "Hey," Mason said, suddenly beside me. "Can we talk again?" I looked past him at Evan, who was laughing with friends near the bar. "You're really bad at timing." "I know," he said. Please." I should have said no. Instead, I followed him. We stepped outside again, farther this time, toward a quiet stretch near the trees. The night air was cool, carrying the faint sound of music behind us. Mason ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't know the seating chart put you there." "Sure," I said, "because this day hasn't had enough irony." He huffed a humorless laugh. "You don't have to stay." "That's funny," I replied, "because earlier you said you were glad I came." "I am," he said quickly. "I just don't want this to hurt you." I stared at him. "That ship sailed 4 years ago, Mason." He flinched. "I loved you," I continued, quieter now. "You don't get to be gentle about it now." Silence stretched between us. "I think about you more than I should," he admitted. "Even now." "That's not fair," I said. "I know." "Then stop." He looked at me like he didn't know how. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The tension felt dangerous, not romantic. Not nostalgic, just raw. Then Mason exhaled. "I need to go back. Evan's probably wondering where I am." "Yeah," I said. "You do." He hesitated. "I hope someday you'll be okay." I met his eyes. "I hope you are too." He turned and walked away. I stayed outside longer than necessary, breathing through the ache in my chest, reminding myself that this wasn't a movie. There was no last-minute confession. No dramatic interruption. This was real life. When I finally went back in, the dance floor was packed. The band had started playing something upbeat. People were laughing, sweating, living. I spotted Jenna near the bar. She handed me another drink. "You okay?" she asked. "I will be," I said. And for the first time, I meant it. Across the room, Mason was dancing with Evan, smiling, fully present. I watched for a moment. Then I looked away. I told myself I was done. Done thinking about Mason. Done replaying conversations. Done pretending this wedding had reopened something I'd already buried. I even believed it for about 15 minutes. That's how long it took before the slow song started. The lights dimmed further, the chatter softened, and couples instinctively drifted closer together. The band shifted into something gentle, familiar, the kind of song that makes people sway instead of dance. Evan pulled Mason into the center of the floor. I didn't mean to watch. I really didn't. But my eyes found them anyway. Mason rested his hand on Evan's back. Natural, easy. Evan leaned in, smiling up at him like the world made sense exactly as it was. They fit. That was the worst part. Jenna nudged me. "You don't have to torture yourself." "I'm not," I lied. "Just observing." She gave me a look. "You want to leave?" I glanced at the exit. Freedom was right there. A quiet ending. the healthy choice. Then Mason looked up. Even across the room, I felt it, his attention snapping to mine like a stretched wire. His expression shifted, just slightly. Not panic. Not longing. Recognition. Of what I wasn't sure. Of me. Of what we'd been. Of the fact that life rarely gives clean endings. He didn't look away this time. Neither did I. The song ended. Applause broke out. People cheered. The moment shattered. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. "Yeah," I said to Jenna. "I think I'm ready to go." She smiled gently. "I'll grab my bag." I was halfway toward the door when a hand caught my wrist. "Trevor, wait." I turned. Mason. Up close again. Too close. His tie was loosened now, jacket gone. Sleeves rolled up. He looked like the version of him I used to know late at night, when things were honest. "I won't keep you long," he said quickly. There's something I need to say." My heart thudded once, hard. "Mason, don't." "I have to," he insisted. "Please." I glanced around. Evan was talking to someone near the bar, distracted. I hated myself for noticing. "Make it fast," I said. He nodded. "I'm not confused. About my life. About my marriage. I love him." Good. That was good. That's what he was supposed to say. "But," he continued, voice dropping, "what we had mattered. And seeing you today reminded me that I never really apologized. Not properly." I crossed my arms, bracing myself. "I was a coward," he said. "I ran instead of fighting for us. And you deserved better than that." The words hit me harder than I expected. "I didn't need this tonight," I said quietly. "I know. I'm sorry." I searched his face for something: regret, nostalgia, doubt. What I found was peace. And somehow that hurt less than I thought it would. "Thank you," I said after a moment, "for saying it." He looked relieved. "I hope you find someone who doesn't hesitate." "I hope you never do again," I replied. We stood there, the last echoes of something finally settling. Mason smiled, small and sincere. "Goodbye, Trevor." This time it didn't feel like a wound. "Goodbye, Mason." I turned and walked out before either of us could change our minds. The night air hit me like a reset. Cool, clean, honest. Jenna followed me to the car, quiet for once. As we pulled away, I glanced back at the barn one last time. Music spilled out through the open doors. Laughter. Life. I didn't feel broken. I felt lighter. Not healed. Not magically over everything. But free. I thought that would be the end of it. That the wedding would fade into one of those strange stories you tell once at a bar dash. Yeah. I accidentally went to my ex's wedding, and then never think about again. Turns out, closure isn't as tidy as people pretend it is. The next morning, I woke up in my apartment with that dull, post-emotional hangover feeling. No headache, no regret, just a strange emptiness, like a room after someone's moved out. Jenna was asleep on the couch, mascara smudged, one heel kicked off. I stepped over her quietly and made coffee. While it brewed, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at it for a second before answering. "Hello, Trevor. It's Mason." Of course it was. I closed my eyes. "You really don't quit, do you?" "I know this is crossing a line," he said quickly. "You don't have to stay on the phone. I just last night felt unfinished." "You're married," I said flatly. "Yes, and I'm not calling to change that." I leaned against the counter, coffee forgotten. "Then why are you calling?" There was a pause, a real one this time. "Because I think I owe you honesty," he said. "And because if I don't say this now, I never will." I didn't hang up. That was my first mistake. "When I left," he continued, "it wasn't because I stopped loving you. It was because loving you scared the hell out of me." My chest tightened despite myself. "You were ready," he said, "to be seen, to be chosen. I wasn't. And instead of admitting that, I made it seem like the problem was us." I swallowed. "You don't get to rewrite history now." "I'm not trying to," he replied. "I just want you to know it was never because you weren't enough." I stared out the window at the quiet street below. For years, I'd told myself that sentence. Forced myself to believe it. Hearing it from him felt dangerous. "Why now?" I asked. "Because last night," he said softly, I realized I never actually said goodbye. I just disappeared. Silence stretched between us. Finally, I said, "You said goodbye yesterday." "Yes," he agreed. "And that one counted." I almost laughed. "You're bad at endings." "I know," he said. "But you're good at surviving them." That did it. My throat burned. "Mason," I said carefully, "I'm glad you're happy. I mean that. But this can't become a thing." "It won't," he promised. "I just wanted you to hear the truth. No more ghosts." I exhaled slowly. "Okay. Okay. Okay," I repeated. "Thank you for telling me." He sounded relieved. "Take care of yourself, Trevor." "You too," I said. And this time, when the call ended, it didn't echo. Later that afternoon, I went for a walk. No headphones. No distractions. Just me and the city. For the first time in a long while, my thoughts weren't looping around the same old questions. That night had closed something. Not perfectly. Not painlessly. But enough. And as I sat on a bench watching the sun dip behind the buildings, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't waiting for Mason anymore. Life didn't transform overnight. No montage. No sudden clarity with a perfect soundtrack. But things shifted. The week after the wedding, I found myself doing small, unfamiliar things, saying yes to drinks after work, deleting Mason's number without hovering over it for 10 minutes, finally unpacking the last box in my apartment that I'd been ignoring since the move. It was like my body understood before my brain did. Something had ended, and space had opened up. On Thursday night, Jenna dragged me out again. "Not a wedding," she promised. "Just a bar. Casual. Human interaction. You need it." "I interact with humans," I said. "I said thank you to the barista twice today." She rolled her eyes and shoved me toward the door. The bar was dim, loud enough to feel alive but not so loud you had to scream. I ordered a beer and leaned against the counter, content to just exist for once without overthinking every breath. That's when someone bumped into me. Sorry. I turned. He was tall, dark hair, warm smile, holding 2 drinks he was clearly trying not to spill. There was an easy confidence about him, not flashy, not guarded. "No harm done," I said. He smiled wider. "Good. Because I'd hate to start the night as the guy who ruins yours." "Bold of you to assume you had that power," I replied. He laughed. "Fair point. I'm Mason Dash." I stiffened. Then he blinked. "Wait. No. That's a terrible opener. I'm not Mason. I'm Luke." I burst out laughing before I could stop myself. "Wow," he said. "That bad, huh?" "You have no idea," I said, still smiling. "But it's fine. Just funny timing." "Well," Luke said, lifting his glass slightly. "To funny timing." I clinked mine against his. "To funny timing." We talked. Easily. About nothing and everything. Work, bad dates, favorite cities, worst movies we secretly loved. There was no weight to it. No comparison running in the back of my head. No part of me waiting for the other shoe to drop. At one point, Luke said, "Can I ask you something?" "Depends," I said. "Is it invasive?" "Only mildly," he said. "You seem lighter than someone who laughs like that usually is. Like you just put something down." I considered that. "Yeah," I said finally. "I think I did." He nodded like that was answer enough. When last call came, he hesitated. "Want to get coffee sometime?" "Not tonight. Not rushed. Not loaded with expectation. Just sometime." I smiled. "Yeah, I'd like that." We exchanged numbers. No fireworks. No dramatic pause. Just a quiet click into place. Walking home later, city lights reflecting off the pavement, I realized something important. Loving Mason had taught me how deeply I could feel. Letting him go taught me how strong I was. And this whatever came next didn't have to be a replacement. Could just be a beginning. Coffee with Luke happened the following Sunday. No nerves. No overthinking my outfit for an hour. I showed up in a worn jacket and sneakers, 5 minutes late, and instead of apologizing too much, I just smiled and said, "Traffic hated me today." He laughed. "Same. I think it's personal." We sat by the window of a small sefkratke that smelled like roasted beans and rain. Outside, the city moved at its usual pace. Inside, everything felt unhurried. Luke asked real questions. Not interview questions. Not what do you do questions. The kind that make you pause for half a second before answering. What's something you used to want that you don't anymore? What makes you feel grounded? When was the last time you surprised yourself? I didn't feel like I was performing. I didn't feel like I was being measured against a past version of myself. When Mason's name came up, because of course it did, I didn't tense. I ran into an ex recently, I said simply. At his wedding. Luke raised his eyebrows. That's brutal. It was, I admitted, but also kind of necessary. He didn't pry, just nodded. Sounds like you closed a door. Yeah, I said, and realized I don't live in that house anymore. When we left the CAF, there was no kiss, no dramatic moment, just a hug that felt warm and easy, and a text me when you get home. And I did. Weeks passed. Luke and I took things slow. On purpose. We walked. We cooked badly together. We learned each other's habits and boundaries without rushing to define anything. There was attraction, sure, but more than that, there was safety. One night, lying awake alone in my apartment, I realized something quietly monumental. I hadn't thought about Mason all day. Not once. No ache. No comparison. No wondering what if. Just me, my life, and the calm understanding that loving someone once doesn't mean you're stuck there forever. Some loves teach you who you are when you're with someone. Others teach you who you are when you walk away. Mason was both. And standing where I was now, no longer someone's plus one, no longer haunted by an unfinished goodbye, I finally understood something simple and freeing. I didn't lose anything at that wedding. I found myself.